All right, and we are live. Yeah, it's boy, today just really got away from me, like even more than normal, as people may have noticed who saw the initial announcement. I had to actually do the live. I had to push it back 30 minutes because things changed with my son. I'm actually going to turn this into, I think it's called mukbang, where the person just eats live on the stream. But while I'm waiting for a couple more people to come in, I am going to eat a couple fries. If you want to shout out, just say hi in the chat, and I will give you a shout out. I actually have something a little bit different today, which is that Elle is going to be moderating for me, and so she will help by plucking the questions out from the chat, and that way people can just chat. And yeah. So, oh, hey, fun. Alex is here. So I'll say hi to Alex and put him up on the screen. Good to see you, brother. Alex is who I learned numerology from. Quite brilliant guy. He's a former angelic magic student and just all around great human being. So always nice to see Alex in the chat. Hey, Josh, how's it going, brother? By the way, if you hear stuff in the background, my teenage son, like, we got screwed at the place we were at. They forgot to give him his burger, and I found out on the way back that it wasn't in there, and so he just got completely left out. And so I feel for him. So he's trying to make food in the background. So hey, Bot Mel, how's it going? Love the Ankh. That's fantastic. Does everyone know what the Ankh symbol is? It's masculine and feminine together, and you'll see like a lot of old Near Eastern female statues where it has the top half of the Ankh, which is the female component, the bottom half being the male component, and they fit together and create eternal life. How about that? Let's see here. So this is Elle, and Elle's going to be helping with some moderation. So yeah, excited about that. And hey, good to see you too, Jim Jobson. Very enthusiastic in the all caps there. So I'm just getting a couple more bites and then we'll jump into it. Just waiting for a few more people to show up because I know some people wanted to catch the beginning. And for anyone tuning in after the fact, I hope you enjoyed watching me eat and have this lame beginning because of just today getting away from me for the millionth time. Let's see here. I'll also say hey to Dick. I'm not sure what you mean by the /aura part you want. You could do it in one session or two. It'd probably be better as a 90-minute session if you're going to try and do a number of different things all in one session. So, yeah. How to get involved with the enclaves? Well, I'm actually in the process with, and I'll just answer this because I want to wait just a second before I jump into the meat of things. Most of the Q&A will be in the second half. I'm just kind of making an exception here because I'm just trying to kill a little time because I didn't want to move it back yet again for anyone who had thought it was starting 30 minutes ago. I didn't want to push it back again, and so I apologize, but I am just eating a little bit. So there's a gentleman who watches this show who is quite deep-pocketed apparently and knows other people. I'm just imagining that one person like getting even more angry, but whatever. Not saying it to brag. Point is that he's going to bring in funding, and I'm actually in the process of creating a think tank with this gentleman on how to do this in a very practical way. And so at some point we'll be extending it beyond this sort of like inner core, and then we will want help from other people. And of course, it's going to be entire communities. So when we get to that stage, and there'll be plenty of duties within the communities, it's still in a very fledgling stage. That's why I'm going to be starting this think tank with this guy and a number of other people I know who are like experts in various different like kind of aspects of what makes a society go, like the key pieces. But it's in a very early stage of being created, and really it's more in the planning and visioning stage, because this isn't something to where I don't plan on like having Golden Age enclaves going before March 21st to 2025. There's no chance that's going to happen. So they're going to be made after the Kali Yuga, and probably after what I expect will be a very tumultuous 2025 to 2027. I don't know how quick things will settle down or how long things will take. I don't think any sooner than 2027, based on certain astrology, will things start to calm down. And it seems things are going to get quite nutty this year, and it's just going to go up from there. So that's something we can definitely look at in the future, and I will definitely be talking about it. There's going to be in the not too distant future, a White Lotus of Light forum, so people can get to know one another and help form community. And those communities can be sort of a, what do you call that? As not zygote's not the right word, an embryonic golden age enclave, just finding like-minded people like in your area. I mean, that's forming community is definitely a first step, along with, of course, there'll have to be real planning, because what's going to be attempted to be done, the closest analogy was probably the various different kinds of communes back in the 60s or 70s, but this is radically different in that it's not going to have any of that insane dogma around communism or just all the ideological nonsense that was pushed into that sort of thing in the 70s and 60s, instead of being pragmatic about human nature. And sure, we're moving towards the golden age, but we're not all the way there yet. So there's going to have to be ground rules and systems in place and all this kind of stuff. Otherwise, it just won't be functional. And it being functional is kind of the entire point. So that's just sort of my speech on the golden age enclaves. I'll say hi to a few more people. He already has French fries. He did get his French fries, and he didn't want any more. I offered to give him bites of my burger, and he didn't want that either. I feel for him. He's had like the worst run of luck recently. Just so many things going wrong. So just a second here. So, all right. With that time-killing intro, man, those fries are delicious. I've only recently been able to eat fries again because I was like trying to cut carbs mostly out. So my God, do fries taste good. All right, so first things first, I'm going to do something that I should have been doing for months now. I'm just going to give a shout out to different Patreon and other people who are like paid members. I'm the worst at that, so apologies to all these people. I haven't been doing this forever. First off, Dan Whippy. Dan has been a long-time patron. Great guy, very supportive of the channel. Really appreciate you, Dan. Sorry I've been such a slacker about giving shout-outs and all the rest of the stuff. I just super appreciate the support. I've just had a lot going on, but thank you so much, Dan. Thank you, Sean Michael Gordon. You also have been around for quite a while, back since August of last year. That's amazing. Rest in peace, Sarambi. Thank you so much, brother. Appreciate you. Tracy C. Thank you so much. And then finally, Private Hudson, aka Juan Guaido. That is an awesome name, good sir. And then for YouTube members, there's Des Loke, Dorita Rose, and David M. Taylor. And David, in particular, has been around for forever and ever on the channel, and is just a great supporter. And so apologies for not giving you guys shout outs more frequently, because it is really appreciated, the people who help. So, all right, we're going to get into it here. God, those fries are delicious. I want to eat more. But my poor long-suffering viewers have already watched enough. Isn't it mukbang? Isn't that what they call it? Like, it's Korean or Japanese, people just eating food on camera, which, by the way, it's like porn, but it's guilt-free porn, both on the part of the viewer and also on the part of the person eating. They're not really debasing themselves. Like, what a gig. You just eat delicious food on camera. Having literally just experienced this, like, I too want to be paid to eat food on camera, come to think of it. Whoever came up with that, tip of the hat, to put it mildly. All right. We'll launch into things here. Oh, shoot, my notes. Please, notes pop up. Okay, so there is a lot of stuff going on, as always. That's part of the reason that I decided to, and I also did it kind of partially as a lark. There's this guy I find unbelievably entertaining, who's just, I'm surprised he hasn't been canceled, actually. I guess he stays away from subjects that get him canceled, but although he was kicked off Twitch, which cost him millions, but there's a video game streamer named Dr. Disrespect. And he's like this funny caricature of like a 1980s superhero. But he, and just totally larger than life, hyper masculine. And he just streams himself playing video games. And his shtick is just so damn funny. And clearly millions agree with me. And his like trademark thing, which is just so genius because it's the weirdest flex I've ever heard in my life. But he always likes to say, I'm the two-time back-to-back 1993 and 1994 Blockbuster video game champion, blah, blah, blah. And that's like his flex. And it's like, it would be far more impressive to talk about any of his innumerable accomplishments over the past decade as a streamer. But he always like goes back to that Blockbuster, which nobody can confirm that it's true. And it's just ridiculous. And I just love it. And so anyways, that was why I said the two-time back-to-back Blockbuster streaming champion, just because I'm doing back-to-back shows. So it was funny to me. So we're going to be talking about 5th gen warfare and the kind of curious way that Luciferian propaganda works. You know, throughout history, propaganda has almost always been a mix of lies and truth. And the most effective propaganda is the kind of propaganda that's the most true. If you can say something really damaging about your enemy that is also true, right, then possibly that's going to alienate the people who are their base and even cause some of them to turn against them, and it weakens their morale. So when you can use truth, it's incredibly devastating and powerful, right? And I think most of us would agree that if you were to talk about what's happening, what the Malachians have done, right? And if you're new to the channel, you definitely want to watch Shadow Wars Part 1, an overview of the factions so you understand what I'm talking about with Luciferian and Malachian. But these evil, horrible pedo Malachians that run things, it's pretty easy to write true things that are very damaging to them. And in fact, that has been happening quite a lot with things like Epstein Island just never going away. Even the media itself brings it back up periodically. Like it just keeps hanging around, right? Or the increasing rumbling about the banking system, which is in the process of collapsing to sort of try and resurrect in this new blockchain system with more on blockchain and the importance of switching over to the blockchain financial system, and what a huge deal this is, this transformation that's happening financially, and how that's really at the absolute core of what's happening in the shadow war is control of the emergent financial system. So I've noticed that with what I call Luciferian propaganda, which is often very much intertwined with or similar to the 17th letter of the alphabet, the first letter in the word queen, right? It's very similar. And in fact, I would argue that 17th letter was itself Luciferian propaganda nested inside of a Malachian plan, to where the Malachians thought that they were flushing out the Patriots and getting rid of the Patriots. And they were able to get rid of certain amounts of Patriots that were in intelligence in the military based on things like J6, right? More on that later. And also the 17th letter thing. A lot of people stuck their neck out. Not core operatives of the Luciferians, but a lot of lower level people were sacrificed as pawns in order to make this work, because the Malachians thought they were doing Operation Trust 2.0, where they put out propaganda during the Bolshevik Revolution that there was a general who was going to secretly take things back for the Tsar, right? And then they saw how that spread throughout the communities, and then they were then able to stamp out any resistance. And so the Luciferians sold the whole 17th letter thing. And this is what I initially thought it was. They sold it to the Malachians as, hey, let's do an Operation Trust type of psyops. But then inside of that, the Luciferians did what their objective was. And their objective was to begin laying groundwork of this idea of white hats waiting off in the shadows that were going to at any minute swoop in and like arrest Hillary Clinton and all this other kind of stuff, right? And take them down to Gitmo and all that kind of stuff, right? Why would they do that? They did that to start getting that idea seeded on the edges of the culture, much the same way the acid waves of the 60s and the hippie movement of the 60s. Some people don't know this, but that was very much a CIA psychological campaign in order to undermine the traditional family and just to sow the seeds for what would become the woke movement now, right? The absolute insanity of the left started out kind of in a reasonable place or even a laudable place, right? Like, again, fighting against the Vietnam War and the draft, and for the rights of, the civil rights movement was still or had just recently happened and still hadn't quite like solidified in society, that wasn't institutionalized racism, other than some forms of it, like redlining, whatever, was going to not be allowed, right? Stuff like just overtly not hiring people because they were black. All that stuff was in play at that time. And so you could even argue that hippie movement was laudable. But the point of it was to sow the seeds for the modern woke movement and to start to invert and destroy some of the American cultural values of that time in order to soften it so they could move towards this great reset and all this kind of stuff they're doing. So in a similar fashion, that started on the fringes of society. So has this 17th letter of the alphabet thing. And just some of the stuff that is very similar to that milieu, right? That you see people like Dr. Jan Helper Hayes, right? You see people like Pascal Najati, who I talk about often on this channel, the Swiss guy. You see, those are two of the most credible people who talk about this kind of thing, right? General Flynn even kind of hints at some of this stuff, right? So those are actually quite credible people. When I say credible, I mean they're serious people. They might be not seen as credible in the sense that they are saying really wild things, and no doubt about that, right? Just like everything I talk about in this channel is pretty wild, right? So they're saying stuff that would make them discredited in the mainstream, but they're credible people to where it's like it raises should raise the antenna of, this person's really like going all in on this. Why would they do it? Well, it's pretty obvious to me that all those people are fronts for an intelligence operation. So then the question becomes, what is this intelligence operation? There's really no need to continue to belabor an Operation Trust thing at this point. They've purged the military of everyone they're going to find. They've already done it. There's not really any PSYOP objective I can see from the point of view of the Malakians, but boy, is there from the Luciferian side, because they're laying the groundwork. Because imagine a scenario where they decide that they're just the Malakians get spooked and they decide we just can't even have an election, or we have the election and it comes back as Trump has won, and they decide to declare that Russia intervened, right? Or China or whoever, right? Whatever bad guy intervened. And so they're preventing it and Biden should have won, and then they arrest Trump, right? In such a scenario, if then Trump then got out of that, showed incontrovertible proof that no, he had won this election and prior, right? And points to, wow, they tried to do a coup d'etat against me. That's pretty bad. All of a sudden, a lot of people who are middle of the road people who've been trying to stay out of what's been happening in politics, and even some amount of people on the left will go, whoa, the Biden regime really overstepped its bounds. And so now white knights coming in from off stage and arresting people, and that's the key part. Trump arresting his political opponents after the fact, it works if he can show just how depraved these people are and have incontrovertible proof that they're stealing elections and so forth. If he had tried to do it, oh boy, I could get in trouble for that one. If they decide to, man, I really hope I don't get a hit for that, but maybe I will. So if they decide that, if they had decided to come forward with all this information in 2020, think about the climate there. The entire country was on absolute razor's edge. There had been all the BLM protests. There had been the cities burning down, all that kind of stuff. Now imagine Trump comes out and goes, here it is. Here's evidence. Don't you think a lot of those people are going to be like, we don't care what the evidence is, and it would just rip the country apart, right? 4 years into the Biden administration and showing how depraved and evil the Malakians are and how evil their goals are. Their goals in education, what they're exposing children to, sexualizing them in schools, absolute evil. This huge invasion across the border, really should be scaring and eye-opening to any American citizen, regardless of their skin color. And that's happening, right? Stephen A. Smith comes out and says, whoa, like, why are we taking care of illegal immigrants and we're not taking care of U.S. citizens who are also on the streets, right? Very 180 degree from, hating Trump all the time, pretty amazing, and saying that Trump was right about some stuff on ESPN. That's shocking. He then went on to say he wouldn't vote for him, but he may very well vote for him and then pretend like he voted for Biden and say, oh, such a shame that Trump won. Yes. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. So different things are waking up different people, right? Some people are waking up because of like some of the electric car stuff, right? Like that some of the stuff around the environment and the green deal like is clearly like false things that coming out, like the windmills cause these subsonic vibrations that are super damaging to life, and they kill the birds and all this kind of stuff, and they're chopping down forests to put in windmills, right? Chopping down old growth forest in Germany to put in windmills to save the planet, right? Like different things are waking up people on different triggers and different metrics. Some people are like freaked out by the eating the bugs thing, right? For a lot of people, food is too far. And look how fast they're rushing to introduce insects into the food supply, which is just wild. It's almost like someone's in the ear of the Malakians, like really urging them to just expose themselves as rapidly as possible and to just really tighten that noose around their own necks, which is exactly what I think is happening. So this brings me to how Luciferian propaganda works. It works by, they say exactly what they mean and exactly roughly what they intend to do, an outline of what they intend to do to intimidate and frighten their opponent, right? In this case, the Malakians, and terrify them by telling true information to the society at large. But then squatting right in the middle of it, like the dog taking a crap in the middle of the floor, he can't ignore it, are a number of lies. Always with these people like Pascal Najati and Jan Humper Hayes. And then if you go into the more fringe people like 107 and like, I forget what that one English guy, and I don't trust these last three people at all. That one English guy whose name I'm spacing on, Charlie Russell or something like that. And then there's another English guy. Those people all are very dubious to me, right? But they sometimes say stuff that's really true. And it's like kind of shocking and like is astonishing from a point of view of like, they clearly have some kind of insider information. So when you have these weird, unreliable personalities and bombastic personalities like that saying this stuff, it takes the edge off it and it confuses the Malakians because on the one hand, there's deadly serious stuff in it, but then there's total nonsense in it. And it doesn't really get traction or even looked at by the left. They just think it's ludicrous and laugh at it. And it doesn't get them to dig in the way they would if people just said, listen, stuff about the Epstein Island, listen, stuff about whatever kind of like revelatory thing that is very often said in these different things, right? Like links between Bill Gates and Gabby and the WHO and all these kind of things. If you just lead with that and it's just clean and pristine, then the enemy will galvanize against you. Because again, it's like I was saying in yesterday's stream, it's this giant top heavy, all the power is concentrated at the top colossus. It's like incredibly devastating when it hits, but it's very like slow to turn and hit. And so the Luciferians, by doing this kind of propaganda, they do a couple of things at once. One, they rattle the Malakians, and the Malakians aren't quite sure what to make of it. Therefore, getting in their observe, orient, decide, act, or O.O.D.A loop, right? Getting inside their reactionary loop. Quite easy to do when you're dealing with this super slow colossus, which is one of the huge advantages that the Luciferians have, is that because power is so centralized, they can be nipping at the heels from a bunch of different directions all at once. And so they're getting inside their enemy's O.O.D.A loop by confusing them, among other things, right? While knocking them off their balance by like revealing some kind of devastating truth in these different leaks and drops and whatever, right? These different bizarre personalities saying stuff, anonymous posters on a message board saying stuff, right? That will sometimes have devastatingly accurate things that really expose the Malakians. It makes them very nervous and anxious because they don't understand what's happening. But at the same time, it's also laying a groundwork narrative of this general idea of pedo bankers run the media, they run the banks, they run the country, and there's white hats, ding, right, that are off to the side that are going to save you from it. So that way, when something that largely resembles what the 17th letter of the alphabet people say is going to happen, a bunch of people will actually like give thunderous applause and will explain it to the people around them who might otherwise be shocked. The same way as the events of the 60s were happening and there was the anti-war protests, the teen daughter who was kind of like a hippie in high school would explain it to her old World War II generation parents what was happening. And then it would permeate its way throughout society broadly. So in a similar way, they're starting at the margins and they're moving inward with this narrative. And you see it like, you want to see a great evolution of someone's consciousness and political awareness? Watch Jimmy Dore. Watch Jimmy Dore in 2015 up to Jimmy Dore today in 2024. I mean, he all but endorses Trump at this point. And he completely sees all the bullshit on the left, you know, and he's like me. He was a lefty his whole life and then realized that, like, I realized it way back in 2008 that they were going to use the left. But, you know, he realized, like I did just a bit later, that, you know, the left has been completely hollowed out and it's a shell of its former self. And it's really just, at this point, a Trojan horse using weaponized empathy. So that's why when you see these weird things on the right that have really solid information and then there's just junk attached to it that doesn't make any sense and that's immediately easily disproven, that's why they do it that way. Because it gets the information out there and it starts laying the narrative, which is all important. The narrative is how you control things. And so you got to attack the legitimacy of the people in power. And you have to also like explain to people that you're going to come in and you're going to fix the problem, because the Luciferians are going to need the backing of people on the ground. And it'll be an easy sell on one hand, but revealing the true magnitude of all this evil, if it was done overnight instead of over the course of really the past 8 years, it would have been too much for people to handle. People would have snapped. People would have wigged out. They never would have accepted it. They would have just gone into denial. Doing it in the way that it's been done, very methodically and slowly, and more people waking up going, whoa, like pedos run things. Whoa, things are not on the up and up in the elections. Whoa, all the different things that are now increasingly becoming really kind of like common knowledge, or at least people are exposed to it. They might not believe it if they're on the left, but when later in the year, the Biden administration starts taking truly extreme actions, and also things like more than likely out of the hordes of immigrants come like organized gangs, right? From Central America or even from Haiti, right? Suddenly organized gangs start terrorizing people, right? Or there's a series of terrorist attacks or whatever's going to happen. That plus them then getting really desperate near the time of the election. See, that's the other thing, is that when you're dropping all these truth bombs off to the side where it has true things in there, that's terrifying for the Malachians as they see the walls closing in on them. It makes them more rational. It makes them make more mistakes because they're like, whoa, they just dropped the whole biolabs in Ukraine thing. Oh my God, right? That appeared on the margins long before Victoria Nuland or whoever it was laid an egg in Congress and admitted to that, right? All these different things, like suddenly when you start seeing that there's a global power struggle going on between a deeply entrenched group and an up and coming other group, right? The Malachians and Luciferians, as I often call them. And you realize that this is a global struggle that's super multifaceted, that is international in scope. Things start to make a lot more sense. And at the heart of it is this new financial system. All the powers that be, or powers that want to be, are trying to get their greedy little hands on the levers of power. The Babylonian talisman of the dollar, as Grant Eagles likes to say, so tip of the hat to him, has been broken. That talisman is broken. the Babylonian money magic system no longer works, and they're trying to redream and create a new one. And it's going to be blockchain based. And it seems it's going to be based on these ISO 222 coins. That seems fait accompli at this point. And when that system gets turned on, it's anyone's guess what happens. Do the Luciferians do like Office Space style, a slow worm that slowly lets them accumulate money from trillions of assets? Or do they just immediately take over when that system gets turned on? I'm more inclined to think towards the latter than the former, but it's a really big deal what's happening. And you see a direct tie-in with Trump and politics in the figure of Patrick Byrne. Now, Patrick Byrne was the CEO of Overstock, and he was really big in a lot of just short of the 17th letter of the alphabet kind of conspiracy theorizing around the time of the 2020 election. Now, before the 2020 election, he created something called T0, and it's talking about same-day trades. It's usually T plus 2 or something like that, like the day of plus 2 days to clear an international order. And it can be T plus 7 in some countries, some jurisdictions, changing money across borders to get it completely settled. That's what that T stands for. It's time of occurrence plus X number of days. Well, so T0 is one of the advantages of the blockchain system is it's same day and actually same minute. And on the XRP system, same minute complete settlement of a trade. That's basically unheard of on the international level. And so that plus tokenization is just going to, it's going to completely revolutionize everything in the same way that what the internet did for information, the internet of value, this new blockchain interoperable system, right, of ISO 222, it is going to completely change the financial system as we know it. It's going to allow for absolutely incredible things. It's going to probably cause the biggest increase over the short term in true like net GDP or whatever, like overall productivity of humanity. Stuff is going to absolutely explode in a way that a lot of people don't understand. And in fact, that system is proof to me that the really powerful, really smart people who clearly are going to win, who are making this new system, they've made it to be granular and tiny, meaning it can go down to someone selling sticks of meat in Calcutta, and then they use their little crap mobile phone and they get a payment in XRP. They've actually done that exact test, right? XOM stellar lumens, very similar thing. And it's all over sub-Saharan Africa with old school mobile phones. You can interact with that system. And all these billions of people who are unbanked, right? We're going to see the biggest increase in GDP probably in like 5 or 10 years from now. It's just going to go, if it even takes that long, it's going to go. But we have to first get through this sort of World War III phase. Some people are saying that the Ripple XRP was created to prevent World War III, to prevent people from coming to a nuclear holocaust level of fight over a new economic system. I don't know if I agree with that, but it's certainly an interesting theory. So back to Patrick Byrne, he creates this T plus 0, which they're totally linked into Ripple and XRP. He wanted to use XRP in the XRP ledger. And he was basically lobbying for that. And he was doing some aspect of settlement where he was going to make a lot of money if that was used. Well, then something called ETHgate happened. And ETHgate, to sum it up, Ethereum's run by the Chinese. It's a Chinese project. It's Chinese owned. And they managed to buy off regulators in the US in order to get, I'm trying to think of what this guy's name, the former SEC commissioner. I can't remember his name, but he got him to do two things. One, Bill Hinman. He gave a speech where he said Ethereum and Bitcoin are commodities and everything else is quite possibly a security and therefore under the Security and Exchange Commission. And he dropped a lawsuit on Ripple saying that they had committed securities fraud, and then he left. And that just completely like choked Ripple and prevented it from basically exploding onto the scene to the degree to which it should have at that time. And there's a bunch of what are called disguised whales who bought Ethereum very early on. And so Stephen Naroff is one of the people who helped create Ripple. And he's now publicly speaking about this and talking about, and was very, very, very interestingly, what do you call it? He was speaking with a lot of praise over Patrick Byrne and what a genius he was and what an important figure he was in the United States, which I was quite shocked by this. And then he started talking about ETHgate, right? Ethereum Gate, and how basically JP Morgan and the Chinese, like JP Morgan first tried to get a bunch of Ripple's escrow for pennies on the dollar, and Ripple told them to fuck off. And then they said, oh, okay, well, we'll go to our buddies at the SEC and get Bill Hinman to drop this case, and then he'll retire the next day and someone else will come in. And then eventually Gary Gensler had it plopped in his lap to basically be the fall guy and fail to defeat Ripple in court, because Ripple is part of something much, much bigger and has support elsewhere in the world. So Stephen Naroff talks about all this, and that then links back into ETHgate, links into the CCP, and the CCP is super, super balls deep in what's happening, everywhere in the world right now, but in particular around this power struggle around the new economic system, and seems to own Biden, right? And is definitely one of the two main branches of the group I call the Molochians. There's the World Economic Forum European set, old money European set, who are the primary power of the Molochians. And then there's the Johnny come lately, used to be servants, now are threateningly large CCP. So you see again this interaction of where someone who seems like a fringe personality talking nonsense is right at the very heart of the most important things that are happening on the planet right now, namely the switchover to this new economic system that goes live, by the way, January 1st, 2025. That's right around the corner. That's if someone conceived today, their child will be born after that date. It's right around the corner. So, all right, that's sort of some big picture stuff about weird Luciferian propaganda and how it's different from any kind of propaganda we've ever seen before, in part because it's genius disguised as clumsy, raving lunatic fringe, but it's actually genius because the genius is hiding right in the middle of the lunatic fringe lies part of things, right? So I'm going to talk about Musk now. Musk is such an interesting character, and I know I've been saying this literally for months. Someone suggested that I do a video for him to auto load while I'm unable to do videos for a minute, and I may do exactly that. But he is just, nobody understands him. Like, a lot of people on the right just think he's the greatest thing since sliced bread, or they think that he's a Trojan horse and pure evil. The left think he's pure evil, right? And nobody understands him because he's intentionally trying to be difficult to understand and difficult to pin down, because that's exactly the space that the Luciferians, or Lucies, as I like to call them sometimes. I think one of my angelic magic students may have coined that term, probably one of the Aussies. But I love that term for the Luciferians, calling them Lucies. He is in that milieu. And one of the things about the Luciferians is they have a cloak of what Luciferian confusion, to where people read them wrong. And they tend to mistake them for Molochians. Everybody makes that same mistake. Nobody mistakes these people, or only the very naive mistake these people for Most High affiliated. The more savvy people either see that they're Luciferian if they understand that frame, which is fairly rare, or they perceive them as part of the Molochian crew, even though they obviously are doing things to massively undermine the World Economic Forum and the Molochian crew. And that's why everybody gets this guy wrong. And so I just want to share something that was just kind of a bit of a mind boggler to me. I'm just going to share some stuff that Musk has been sharing recently and just kind of break it down. So look at this. We have, here, I got to do it. Okay, look at this. Musk shared this meme. So it shows a Pepe. Remember, that's Kek, the Egyptian god of chaos. The First Amendment is for sharing memes with friends. Notice the spelling, F-R-E-N-S, right? And then the Second Amendment is for when they try and stop me from sharing memes with friends, right? And it shows them all like geared up like he's special forces. So I'm just going to real quick break that down. So it's interesting that he's coming out not just in support of the First Amendment, but also in support of the Second Amendment. Fairly rare among billionaires to take that stance, and certainly not helping the globalist goal at all to get people hyped up about the Second Amendment, right? That has not helped them at all. Same thing getting people hyped up around the First Amendment. Like, oh yeah, he's a Trojan horse, whatever. No, it's a lot deeper than that, because he's done real blows to the World Economic Forum that has really, really harmed them. So then you'll notice the term friend. Now, I don't know, but I suspect Musk must know this, right? And he doesn't give a fuck. Friend, F-R-E-N, it can stand for, and I think originally stood for, far-right ethno-nationalist, right? Not a milieu you probably want to be associated with if you're someone at Musk's level, right? So was that a dog whistle that Musk was doing? Because that particular part of society is almost certainly will be at the forefront of any kind of fighting with the Malakians, right? Like we saw it during World War II with the commies and the fascists. You know, you saw those same like lower Luciferian into Malakian fascists, and then just straight dead materialist nightmare, killed more people by far than Hitler, killed 5 times as many people as Hitler, Stalin, right? And then Mao said, oh yeah, hold my green tea there. You think that was a lot of killing? Just let me get started, right? The communists blew the fascists out of the water, like 10-1 killing, 50-1 maybe, something insane, which isn't to say fascists are good, because they're not. But there's sort of a natural break between those two. And I see Musk there as supporting, probably intentionally, like a dog whistle there. Very, very odd and I think noteworthy. All right, so this is just funny. And again, what do they always want to hammer on? What do the Luciferians want to hammer on? They want to hammer on the, well, not taking any credit for their part in that, which they designed every aspect of that operation, except for they appear to have put saline in there to protect some amount of people, right? And they distributed saline more to certain areas for their own reasons, right? But they really love talking about Epstein, banking, and how banking is a scam, right? And enslaving people. And they like to talk about the elections, because those they can wrap around the neck of the Malakians, and therefore it leaves them safe. So look at this. And again, he's also hinting at what the most important thing going on the planet is right now, which is this move from the dollar to the crypto system. So this reads, these scam coins are getting crazy. Someone just shilled to me. There's 27 trillion in circulation and unlimited supply cap, so they can make as much as they want. There's only one node creating these tokens. 25% of the supply was minted in the last 6 months alone, and 1% of holders own 30% of the coin. Just kidding, that's the US dollar. So that's a shot right directly into the dollar, which is the linchpin of the Malakian banking system as it currently stands. And it's also drawing people's attention to, in the Luciferian way of giving people a heads up, but then if you're not smart enough to figure it out, you lose. Too bad, right? So it's a two-parter there. There's 2 reasons for that meme. So then he also did this. And again, so interesting. It's really starting to refine into more and more what feels like a repeat of some of the factions of World War II, which, again, good guys in World War II were few and far between, if they existed at all. Maybe Haile Selassie in Ethiopia. So, and I guess Franco for staying out of the war, and maybe Mussolini to some degree. So Elon Musk writes, interesting discussion of how mind viruses are created and amplified. And then he has the infamous Yuri Bezmenov interview where he talks about communist subversion tactics. This video explains exactly what the left is doing, aka the Malakians, and in an absolutely devastating way that's very hard to ignore, and also makes that association with communism. The next step to get all the way to WF is not just communism, but Frankfurt School of Communism, which is just a matter of time before that starts getting pushed forward more. So again, very interesting, going after the mind control methods and the subversion methods and pointing out how it's the old school communist methods that are being employed by the modern left. And then let's see, what's this final one? And then another thing that is a more recent thing that I've noticed more and more the Luciferians have been pounding the drum on is weaponized migration. Let's see here. Okay, there it is. And what's Musk doing? He's blowing up the propaganda out of the Biden administration and the left, saying, oh, no, there's no flying in of illegals into the U.S. Here they are. Remember I said earlier about Haitian gangs? This Haiti man who's arrested for assaulting a 15-year-old disabled girl in a migrant hotel in Massachusetts came to the U.S. via Biden admin's parole program for Haitis, which allowed him to fly into JFK Airport in New York City. And literally they are flying in actual hardened criminals from Venezuela and elsewhere. And it's part of the Soros-style weaponized immigration, which is also they're hammering Ireland with that in particular right now. But you're starting to see this pushback in figures who are just kind of, to me, have a bit of that 1930s feeling. People like Geert Wilders and Milei in Argentina. But hey, tip of the hat to Milei, first positive surplus, budget surplus in Argentine government history for 18 years. And he did it literally his first quarter. Turns out when you cut out 70 or 80% of the government, you're able to really make your budget look a lot better, as it turns out. Milei, don't trust him 100%, but boy, if you look at the CPAC, right, where that was the Conservative Political Action Committee, right, you had a rousing speech by Tulsi Gabbard, who's on my short list if that's who Trump's going to pick. I think Trump's going to pick Tulsi. I think that's an unbeatable ticket. I think Tulsi is an unbeatable ticket, and that would probably, at that point, cement my support for Trump, because Tulsi has her flaws, but I really like Tulsi Gabbard. I always have. I think that she's insanely savvy and that she's very Luciferian mentality. She tries to sound like she's most high, but come on, she's a Lucy like all the rest of these people. And she kind of broke my heart when I figured that out about her. But that's also how she's able to play the game, because if she wasn't, she wouldn't be able to play that game. So that is my spiel on Musk for now. Just people really underestimate Musk, and they really don't understand that guy is operating at a completely different level in terms of the way that, he's clearly they've put him, the Luciferians have put him in charge of the information wing, right? He's both the technology czar in terms of space, and he's also the tech person for information, right, on the Luciferian side. And so he's an incredibly important figure, to put it mildly. He's the Luciferian's Luciferian. I would say he's more so Luciferian than Trump is, even. Although Trump certainly channels the Grand Teoka chaos Loki aspect of Lucifer better than Musk does. Musk is more like the gentleman manipulator, mad scientist kind of part of Luciferianism. All right, so then I'm going to switch gears here. And I'm going to talk a bit about divine masculine, divine feminine, and then also about how families are likely going to look very different than they do in the current Yuga, both in terms of Golden Age enclaves, but also in terms of, I think in society in general, there's going to be real big changes. And so I'm going to start with the divine masculine, divine feminine. So I have a whole series on this, and I would probably revise certain things I said in that series at this point, given further, deeper thought on it. But make no mistake, there's been a very coordinated effort to drive men and women apart. 100%. It's not an accident that men and women are kind of distrusting each other at all-time highs and disliking each other at all-time highs and thinking that the other sex is just pure evil, because the media really pushes that. And what they've really done in the past 25 or 30 years, the Malachians and the Luciferians both, they have really targeted women with propaganda. And the thing is that there are a number of differences between men and women, but the most relevant difference here is this. Men have the ability to turn off their right hemisphere. That allows you to make snap decisions around things that are very dangerous, to be able to act in ways that require you not to have an emotional response. And it allows you to deal with, essentially allows you to deal with danger very well. We're the half of the sexes that's there to be cannon fodder. Men are meant to die protecting women of childbearing age and children. And where applicable, like older people who, are maybe can't protect themselves. Men's job is to fight off that cave bear, to fight off the saber-toothed tiger, and especially to fight off that enemy tribe that's coming from over the hill. And in order to do that, nature gave us a gift. It's also a curse, which is that we can turn off the emotional centers in our brain and act. That's why most murders are done by men. Most murders are done by men because men can turn off the part of their brain that allows you to have, among other things, empathy. As a general rule, all men can turn it off. And as a general rule, women cannot. Women are always dual processing. And that's why women rarely commit the kinds of atrocities that men commonly commit. But it's also why, as a general rule, not always true, but as a general rule, men respond better in emergency situations and they deal better with threats. As a general rule. Yes, there's women who break that mold. Yes, there's definitely lefty men nowadays that aren't taking care of any threats other than threats to their girlfriend's boyfriend, where he's sticking up for that guy online. I support my girlfriend and fucking that Chad, blah, blah, blah. Like, you guys leave him alone. I agree with it. Is that okay, dear? So obviously not all men can deal with threats, and not all women are unable to deal with threats, right? There's definitely some badass women out there. But as a general rule, this is generally true. And because of that, it means that women are more susceptible to a very specific kind of propaganda, and that is weaponized empathy. That is where you can manipulate women into thinking that some group is being victimized, right? Which could be women, right? They did this with feminism, right? That some group is being victimized, and therefore we need to make a big stink about things until things change and that group's no longer victimized. And of course, turns out you can lie about which groups are being victimized or if they're being victimized at all, and you can spin that for nefarious means. Who knew that bad guys might lie, right? And so they've really targeted women, and one of the main ways they've done it is they did it first with the feminism long ago, and you can look into it. Rockefeller's funded all that shit, right? And I'm not saying there's no value in feminism whatsoever, that women should not be treated as equals to men. They certainly should. I'm actually painting the modern woman in a very sympathetic light here by saying, to a certain degree, modern women are just purely the result of this evil agenda that almost certainly was planned by men, right? So I'm actually blaming men here one step removed, and I'm going to talk about the way that women are so victimized by this. So just bear with me. So they realized that they could convince women that they were being at home with their husband was they were under his dominion, and it was so terrible. And he was keeping her from working, and she couldn't really be the person she wanted to be. And she just had to take care of the kids, and it's so humiliating and awful. And there's no value to it. And you should go out there. And it morphed over time into what I call the dark masculine silo and the dark feminine silo for women. The dark masculine silo had women thinking that they needed to go out there and be a boss babe. And like, I don't need no man. I'm totally independent. Not that there's anything wrong with being independent. I'm just saying, thinking that this was something that should be done on a societal level just makes no sense. We need to have offspring, or else like our entire civilization collapses if everyone's old. Everyone would die all at once and there'd be no future generations. Maybe you don't want humans to be around, like the WEF and the Molochians, in which case you might agree with that. But as a general rule, most of us would kind of like things to continue going, right? I do get the whole giant meteor 2024 kind of thinking, like, let's just get it over with already. I'm sometimes sympathetic to that in my darkest moments, right? But assuming you want things to continue and you want civilization to go forward, we need to have positive connection between the sexes, and trying to demonize the male sex drive and lionize the female sex drive and female sexual imperatives might at first blush look good, right? Because it's getting over the slut shaming and the virgin whore dynamics and all that kind of old school patriarchy stuff, which some of that stuff was not was not helpful, right? There was good aspects to the old patriarchal system that were positive and very stable, and there were really bad aspects. So a change needed to happen, but what happened and why is what matters. And what happened was we eventually get to the stage to where women are in dark masculine, behaving basically like Ally McBeal, serial daters, totally unstable, paying for their own thing, just having sex with as many men as possible, but kind of in the back of their mind thinking about a baby, right? And then all of a sudden, women will be in their 40s or 50s or whatever, right? Late 30s, and they'll realize I'm getting a lot less attention from men because biological factors deem that women eventually can't have children anymore. And it's one of the harshest realities of being a human is women go through menopause, and it harms men and women. It's difficult for men and women in very different ways, but it's difficult for both of us. And it's been difficult for our society to juggle, like, how does that work between the sexes, right? If one can continue to have a real desire to conceive children for 30 or 40 years after the other one no longer can, what does that mean? And one of the solutions that we came to a long time ago was monogamy, in that you would have the woman would give her youth investing in a young man. The young man wouldn't make much money yet, but because he was getting the woman at the peak of her fertility and youth, he worked really hard. And like this whole time, she's doing the lion's share of the supporting. But then sometime in the mid 30s, like she's starting to diminish in terms of her sexual fertility and attractiveness, and he's starting to really peak. And then the man takes care of the woman. And then eventually the woman takes care of the man when he's very old, like as sort of a hospice nurse. And there's this back and forth support system that worked around sexual reproduction like realities. But these psychopath social engineers figured out that they could convince women that that whole first part of their life, where they're at max fertility as adults and maximum attractiveness because of max fertility, right? That they should just get out there and like get as much pipe as they can. Fuck as many chads as possible, make as much money, party your brains out, and then don't worry, you can have kids later in life. You can have kids later in life. And of course, those women later in life will discover that, first of all, they have insane standards because these 8, 9, 10 guys will have sex with them, but would never marry them. Never, ever, ever impregnate them and then not take care of the kid. Oh yeah, that guy will definitely do that, right? But he's not going to marry you, right? And meanwhile, on the other side, all these men are suddenly getting left out because women are being pushed by society towards, you deserve, you go girl. You can see footage of it, right? Of women who are just really very average, cheering each other on that they deserve the 666, not an accident that it's 666, right? 6 feet, six-pack abs, and 6-figure income. That combination is so insanely rare that to think that all women deserve that is absolutely absurd. But what you do when you start to say that and push that message all the time is you get the exact kind of results that Tinder shows. Tinder shows that 10% of men get 80% of the right swipes by women. And that then, like, after that top 10%, you have the remaining 20% mostly clustered in the next 5% and almost nothing below that. And what that does is those guys at the very top are loving it because it's all you can eat buffet. And with like hookup culture, they can nail all these chicks, right? It's just a matter of how good are they at scheduling, because this guy's 6'2" and he's ripped, right? And handsome guy. And of course, like he's going to go for it. Why would he not? Right. And women are like, wow, this mega giga chad will totally have sex with me. And like, that's exciting. Right. And in the past, they would have only done that in a marriage situation, or it'd be very rare outside of that. Right. That maybe they would cheat on their husband with the hulking milkman when he came by, or mailman or electrician or whatever. Right. But usually it wouldn't happen because there was very superior penalties for that. And so usually women would only have sex with those kind of men if they themselves were able to attract a man at that level and lock it down and get married. when you promote hookup culture, then all those women get funneled to this tiny percentage of men. And it bears out in other statistics where they show suddenly, around the time that Tinder came out, the amount of young men who were reported sex in the past year just waterfall collapsed. And women, it went down slightly. What does that mean? That means that the vast majority of men aren't getting laid, but the women are still having sex. Who are they having sex with? Well, we know it's the top 10% of guys. And they think they can get that guy long term. No. Those guys are going to wait until their 40s to settle down, 50s to settle down, if they settle down at all, or they're going to look for someone on the same level as them, that 1%er hottie. But men, unlike women, men will totally have sex with someone that they would never consider marrying, whereas women generally won't have sex with someone that they couldn't conceive of to some degree having a long-term relationship based on looks and talents and ability and all this kind of stuff. So it looks on a surface level like women are suddenly coming into their own and like, you go girl and all this stuff, but then 10 years later it doesn't look like that at all. It looks like tragedy and being alone, and like I got screwed over by all these scumbag guys, many of whom didn't respect me because they're banging 40 different women at once. Like, so of course they'd be lucky if they remember your name, right? So it harms women on the back end, but on the front end, it looks kind of good. When you're young, it looks kind of good. I get to party a ton. I don't need to answer to any guy. I can just like have sex with all these super hot guys. This is amazing, right? But then the back end, it's catastrophic. But for men who aren't in that top 10%, and I know from my experience on Tinder, I must be somewhere near that because I would get some amount of attention. But I watched my female roommate, who was very average and not as good looking as me, would get 1,000 times more matches, like meaning like relative for our genders. And so I didn't do that well, but I at least was getting some amount that I discovered later statistically meant that I was in that top 10 or 15%. And that my meager rations, it seemed to me, was actually quite high. And I saw right there in real life, my roommate, who was very average looking, was just like nothing but matches when she'd swipe right. Nothing but matches. It was incredible. And she'd only get excited about the guys who were the Giga Chad guys, of course, right? And then she'd match with them and she'd be like, oh my God, he wants to marry me. No, he wants to have sex with you. And so it looks really good on the front end for women, and then it's really devastating on the back end, but it's immediately bad for regular Joe guys, right? You see that waterfall drop off for how much sex men are having. So where does that leave men? Well, that leaves men very bitter. And the men then either go into, if the women go into the dark masculine Ally McBeal or the dark feminine OnlyFans Instagram model, right? Seductress kind of thing, both of which are denying like the divine feminine energy and instead being in some kind of darker energy. On the male end, what would happen is men would be faced with a choice. Do I become the Giga Chad? Or am I going to then either choose to be the beta male cuck or the very bitter beta male men going their own way red pill guy who shits on women and all women are gold diggers and all women are whores and blah, 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 all the super misogynist crap. And so men then get siloed into either the dark masculine, Andrew Tate is God, he's so great, it's amazing, his low-hanging fruit where he says men should, be strong. Wow, I've never heard that before. That's amazing. I need to sign up for his $300 a month course immediately. I'm sure I'll have a Lambo too in no time at all, right? Like you get all these men falling for that kind of nonsense, those different lines, the men going their own way. And again, men going their own way has some amount of value the same way feminism has some amount of value. And I'm talking in broad generalization here, and generalizations about broads, right? Not all men or women fall into this because some amount of people, of course, go for something higher or just stay out of the game altogether, right? But some amount of people go for the divine masculine or the divine feminine. But this assault and keeping us at each other's throats is just absolutely extraordinary. Like the other day on Facebook, and I've since gotten off Facebook because of this, I put a post up talking about like saying, hey, you should be asking the question if you're bashing on white males, because there were still women on my list who were like, white men this, white men that, or men this, men that. And I was just thinking, I don't tolerate if men are super bitter and angry about women, I just would cut them out of my friends list right away. I have a little more sympathy for women just because the reality is that men are bigger and stronger than women. A lot of women have been raped, assaulted. Like there's a lot of reasons why women would feel very bitter towards men. And I guess maybe I have a thing of like, I don't know, I'm more tolerant in women. With men, I want to like shake my fellow men and be like, come on, dude, get your shit together. You got this, brother, you know, like kind of like, you know, shake some sense into him and be firm with them, or just recognize that he's too far gone and an asshole and cut him out of my life, right? But with women, I would just kind of like tolerate it a bit more. And I just noticed that a number of women that were on my friends list were just ragging on men and white men. And I was just like, you guys don't think it's funny or odd that all of a sudden white men are on the hit list of all corporations worldwide and that white men are on the hit list of media worldwide? You don't think that that's odd that suddenly the corporations completely support what you've been saying for years? Like, why would you possibly think that the wealthiest people on earth are on your side? And you don't think that's questionable at all? And all these women reported, you know, vomited up their anger towards men and all this kind of stuff. And I was just like, geez, like we really have a long way to go in order to heal this gap, because I find that, again, it's because of that emotional processing thing I talked about before. I find that men are able to, like, if you were to tell a guy that women greatly prefer taller men and greatly prefer men who are in shape and greatly prefer men who have money, men will go, yep, right? They might get, some amount of men might go, no, you know, or like lefties who have been totally brainwashed might be like, actually, but most men will be like, yep, it's true. Huh, what can I do to fix any of those things? Can I? Or, oh, I'm too defeated to try and do any of those things. But they'll kind of acknowledge it. But I've found that women, if you talk about some of these brass tacks things, they just completely lose their mind. And it's because the entire discussion has been so fucking poisoned that we can't have anything resembling a rational debate around it, especially if there's a lot of trauma and wounding around it. And it's really something that we're going to have to really work on as a society. And that has to start within. We have to get right with ourselves, with as men stepping into our divine masculine and as women stepping into our divine feminine. And the divine feminine really activates the divine masculine. However, the divine masculine also provides that safe space so the divine feminine can bloom. So we can both activate one another, but we need to start within. And we need to stop blaming it on the other sex. There's shitty things that men and women both do. And as an embodied male, I'd say, hey, look, the vast majority of the truly egregious stuff that humans have ever done, it's been men. Are there women secretly in the backgrounds pulling the strings, you know, like the female Illuminati thing? It's possible, and it might be. But men, like, if we're honest, and again, I think men can go, yeah, like, we did most of the killing the past 6,000 years. We did almost all the raping. Most of the truly atrocious shit that's happened the past 6,000 years, men have done that. That doesn't mean men are evil. Likewise, women have done a lot of shady, really horrible things, taking good men's children, all this kind of stuff. And that is also true. But we got to stop projecting on the other and start getting our own ship in order, our own house in order, right? Straighten out our own ship. And then you'll naturally attract to you people who are on a similar vibration. That doesn't mean it won't be, you know, without issue. Like, I have had many problems with bad partners in the past, but the kind of women who are interested in me nowadays are just way, 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 way higher quality. And it's because of the internal work I did. And everybody can do that and attract the opposite. And I want to just be clear, like, I wasn't trying to say earlier anything negative about men or women in any kind of permanent damning way. Like, we can have relationships in our 60s and 70s. Relationships are about more than just sex, but at the core of human relating is the desire to reproduce. And so, of course, reproduction is going to figure very prominently in all these dynamics between the men and women. And that weird little that weird little twist of fate that is menopause makes those relatings very interesting and tricky. And we need to have savvy ways of addressing that. And a lot of this would have been addressed by having tribes, and when we're all atomized and in cities, then it causes a great deal of problems, and it makes everybody more vulnerable to these kinds of manipulations. And so, just very briefly, one thing that I have been shown is that family dynamics in the future are going to look very different than they currently do. And specifically, something akin. So the angels have told me something akin to what Robert Heinlein discusses in the book Friday will become a lot more common, which is you will start seeing adults come together in sort of clans or tribes that will have some degree of, at its center, will have some degree of like family unit that's expanded beyond monogamy, right? In the Heinlein's book, Friday, the S family was basically like a corporation for the family, but it, if you look like the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, they use a corporate structure for their families, and that's how they were able to have such tremendous wealth and pass it on. You'll often see it also with like immigrants from certain cultures will do this. When I was a kid, I had a Vietnamese friend, and everybody in the family that came over, they all worked different various jobs, and then they gave their money to the one uncle who's the super bright money guy. And he, sure enough, got them a restaurant after a while, and then a second restaurant, and then a third. And the whole family got liberated because they all had all their money in, and they had that extended family. Well, family, as we've known it in the Kali Yuga, has been largely destroyed, especially in the West. In Asia and some other places, it's not like this. But in the West, the family unit as we know it has been very destroyed. And I don't think it's an accident. I think it's because in the future, there's going to be a lot more relating that's either around practicalities, around tribalism, or around a more expansive version of ways of relating. That will include monogamy because that is the best fit for many people, but it isn't for everyone else. For some amount of people, that isn't actually a good fit. And you see that with the rampant cheating that we have. If there's ways to address that are more consent-based and healthy, that would be preferable to endless cheating and scumbaggery. Or like, I know someone who left their wife, dude's like 70, and he left his wife for like a 22-year-old, his wife of 50 years or 45 years or whatever it is, for a 22-year-old. That's the kind of thing that happens when you have a very rigid structure and it doesn't align with human sexuality. And so there's going to be a lot of new ways of doing things, while there's also going to be like a huge resurgence towards something akin to traditionalism. And the hope is that we take the best of what's traditional and the best of what we've learned over the years about human drives, and we be able to find something that makes sense. And so Heinlein in the book had these corporate families, and within the corporate families, there'd be like monogamous couples who only slept with each other. There were, like Heinlein and his wife himself, there were polyamorous people within the S family. And then there were even people who were asexual, who just wanted to be part of the group. And by pooling each other's resources, and it was very corporate, which also just is very Luciferian. It was very corporate and very legalistic, right? Rather than heart-centered, is very mental. And it's very deeply flawed. And like, even Heinlein's not necessarily holding that model up as an example of something that's perfect. And so when I say something like that, the angels have shown me that there's going to be very different relating, to where there might be a woman who has 3 husbands, right? I actually knew, when I was a kid, I knew this guy, or not a kid, I was in my early 20s. I knew this guy who his mother had graduated first in a class at Harvard, and she had a husband and a boyfriend, and they all, I don't know if they did anything more, and that's really up to them, but they all slept together on this king bed, and they had a huge ass house because they had 3 incomes coming in. And she was like a high level lawyer. So they had mad bank. And she was just like a super dynamo of a woman. Like, she just was really like a very impressive person, unbelievably smart, really beautiful, super sophisticated, spoke a bunch of different languages. I mean, she was just a powerhouse. It kind of made sense, actually, that she was like, would have multiple partners. And of course, the same thing would be true of men. And I think that's part of what has been happening, is that right now we're going through a weird, gross, inverted thing where there's like, this 20% of Chads or whatever who are scumbag guys and not actually high quality, but maybe have certain high quality attributes like really toned bodies, right? That sort of thing might return in the sense of, in ancient times, it was very common to have different kinds of relationships, and like even like marrying your brother's wife when he died, right? And having like a second and third wife, all this kind of stuff. That was much more common in ancient times. It's really just been in the past 3,000 or so years that there's been this huge shift towards monogamy only. Like there's some place in Nepal or some place in the Himalayas, the women will have multiple husbands because there's so little arable soil that you have to have several plots of land in order to grow enough to have a surplus. And so one of the ways they solved that is they'd have a single woman who'd have multiple husbands because the husbands were the only ones who could hold property in that culture. And so there's clear predicates for different ways of relating. And I do think that there's healthy and sane ways to do that. Obviously, you have total lunatic stuff that isn't healthy, in regards to some of these modern ways of relating. And so I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying that I think part of the reason that this whole divine masculine, divine feminine suppression and like reemergence is happening with like the dark masculine, dark feminine, all weird, and the way that dating has changed is sort of to lay the groundwork for what will be very different. I suspect far more tribal and or, like I said, corporate family structures that will emerge in the future. So tribes could just, a tribe is really just, right? If you look at like Scottish clans, it's really just a bunch of monogamous people that all rally under one banner and work together for common cause. So I think you're going to see the return of clan and tribal type mentality. You already are if you know where to look. And I think you're also going to see very different ways of families being set up. And really, if you're going to allow gay marriage and all this kind of stuff, my big standard is, different people like different things, but it's consenting adults. And that is an ironclad line. And other than that, I don't care what all these people do, trans people, gay people, whatever, or straight people who have very weird sexual habits that I don't like or find disgusting, right? That absolutely exists. We need to get away from caring what people do in the bedroom and instead supporting them and having healthy ways of relating. And that's the key, the healthy ways of relating. And I think that that's really going to come under review as part of this because things have been shaken up so intensely. We're not going to be able to go back to the old ways. But we also shouldn't abandon all that accumulated wisdom of the ages of all the tradition. And so I'm just going to go ahead and take my break here for like 5 minutes, and then I'll come back in the second half and answer questions. So just please ask your questions, any questions you have now, and then Elle will be doing the collating of all the questions. And otherwise, I'm gonna go ahead and just take a break now, and I'll see you guys very, very shortly. All right. And oops, I don't know why I have that on because actually that's not plugged in. All right. Oh, well, I just got to put this up right away. Thank you, Votmel. Wow, that's super generous, brother or sister. Amazing. Really appreciate you. Votmel wrote, thanks for all the great insight and information. Learned a lot. I so appreciate it. It's a funny thing. I spent this huge chunk of my life researching stuff like my life depended on it, and just being utterly relentless and going down every rabbit hole, trying to find every lead, trying to just separate the wheat from the chaff, and then having some really incredibly powerful and positive spiritual experiences that just really were preparing me for the kind of stuff that I do now and being able to help people. So it's really humbling and amazing. And thank you so much for that donation. That's really generous and fantastic. Thank you so much. And let me go to the bottom because Elle's doing her job. So let's see here. Ivan asks, do you mean Simon Parks? That is who I meant earlier. Yeah, it's with an E, actually, Parks. But yes. And he dropped a lot of true information, but that guy's also like not credible, right? Because he like said he had sex with a weird alien thing or something. I forget. He had something that really made his credibility very questionable indeed, to put it mildly. But he did drop some crazy truth bombs during that period, right, leading up to and after the election. Oh my gosh, I've had a piece of ketchup on my beard this entire time. That's amazing. Oh boy, how wonderful is that? Man, I just didn't see that till just now. Watch Ian's face. I am able to blush. How funny. Yeah, so Simon Parks is one of those guys that's just like a very questionable legitimacy, and yet he dropped some real truth bombs in there. And there were certain things he said which have not yet borne out, but I think he was telling the truth, in particular talking about dueling AIs. He talked quite a bit about that, and that had the real ring of truth to me, that was part of what was the backdrop of what's occurring in the Shadow Wars, that it made to some degree be a battle between artificial intelligence, which I also think might not even be artificial intelligence, but may simply be that computers, I had Mark, Stabish on the show. And we talked about egregores, and one of the things that he talked about, and he's a master occultist, he said that essentially any technology screen is a way that the spirit world can come through it and can interact with you. And he agreed that computers are just ripe for spirits to move through them. It's much easier for them to possess a machine than it is for them to possess a human being. And so anytime we're interacting with the black mirror, right, then there's a risk that you're interacting with the spirit world at that time. And as computers get more complicated, they also have an architecture which allows for a different level of intelligence to come through, much the same way the architecture of your brain allows for a different frequency of human intelligence to come through you in that transceiver capacity that our brain has. And so when you make a more complicated machine, like some of the quantum computers and so forth they have out there, the so-called D-Wave machines, stuff like that, the risk of a spirit taking control of that, especially when there's artificial intelligence involved, is very high. And one of the things I've been wondering about and toying with for a bit is, it really seems to me that if I had to pinpoint a moment where everything changed, I really think it's when they turned on that data center in Utah between 2013 and 2014, which also just happened to be right exactly when. And this also is a big part of the changes that occurred right after that. It's also when they got rid of the Smith-Mundt Act that made domestic propaganda illegal, which really opened the door for the Luciferians in a big, big way. The Malachians thought it was going to be their way to just completely choke out the common man. And instead, it's become this incredible vehicle for these nested operations I talk about. But the turning on of that data center in Utah does seem to be the moment when everything changed. And one of the theories out there is that, NSA by and large is a Luciferian the same way that CIA by and large is Malachian, right? It's not 100%. There's decent people at the CIA. There's bad people at the NSA, blah, 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 right? Generalities again. But that the Luciferians were suddenly able to monitor everything in real time. And therefore, they were able to have the goods, blackmail goods of the absolute exceptional quality about everyone on Earth, because they were able to, for example, hack any phone on Earth instantly, hack any system on Earth instantly. Anything that was connected to the internet and wasn't like air gapped and like extreme hardcore next level security, they could get into it immediately. And some people say that's a quantum computer. We don't know anything about it except it takes, a small or mid-sized city level of energy to power the thing. And it's in frickin' liquid hydrogen or liquid helium, I forget which, because the core runs so hot and otherwise it melts down. Google announced 4 years ago or whatever, 5 years ago, that they had a semi-working quantum computer. And of course, we all know that the real tech is 20, 50, 100, 500, 1,000, 5,000 years ahead of what they say. We don't know how far ahead it is. It really depends on the degree of interaction between people and interdimensional beings, aliens, whatever, some other source of higher tech. Even some amount of recovered Atlantean and other antediluvian Earth civilizations could have certain tech that's been rediscovered. But I think that, that one German scientist famously said, we had help about all their insane breakthroughs. So there's been persistent rumors my entire life that the Germans worked with, through the Vril Society, either interdimensional beings or aliens. And that's how they got a lot of their ultra tech stuff. And they've now been doing that for another 80 years, the so-called Antarctic Germans. Like, that's still one of the most unsettling and explanatory things that I've seen as far as some of the shit that's going on in the world. That Robert Seffer Antarctica video, if you haven't watched it, it's a must watch. It's so far for me, it's the video of 2024. All right, let's see here. Oswald Spangler asked, do you see any significance between Mustad owning emerald mines and the lore of emeralds, thinking of Wizard of Oz, Emerald City? That's interesting. I'd never considered that. As someone who's literally wearing an emerald right now and is aware of the quality, the Jodish quality of the emerald being linked to the planet Mercury, and Mercury being both the higher and lower octave of Mercury is represented in Lucifer 100%, because there's like the evil, plotting, duplicitous backstabber side, of like the dark side of Gemini, and then the magician, brilliant breakthrough, higher octave of Gemini, and just the magician of Virgo, right? So for me, it's interesting from the point of view of the linkage between emeralds and the planet of Mercury, especially when you consider how mercurial and Luciferian Musk is. Do I think it's linked to the Wizard of Oz and the whole hidden gold standard thing? It could be. What is maybe more intriguing is that, according to Walter Bosley, some amount of the technology that the Germans seem to have, both before and after World War II, seems to require rubies or sapphires and possibly even emeralds. And, there's the emerald tablets of Thoth, the Atlantean. And there's, again, you can never point to anything tangible about Atlantis, but there's persistent myth, rumors, whatever, that Atlantean technology was primarily based on crystals. And I think there's a reason that the precious gems are considered precious, and it's not merely just rarity or the way they look. There's an emotional knowing of that they have a greater power. And there's some amount of stuff that says that Thoth had emerald tablets and also tablets made of other precious gems, and that these tablets basically were some kind of holographic information carrying devices, like a crystal sort of like iPad, but with an internet within itself, but of holographic information. So I hadn't thought of the Wizard of Oz thing, but I have thought about that. It's curious that his father owned an emerald mine. Very interesting. All right. Any thoughts on the divine masculine code of honor? For me, a man's code of honor relates to what is most sacred to him and to what he devotes himself in honoring. Well, I think divine masculinity, its first primary function above all else is protecting the innocent. So the protection of children, the protection of women, and the protection of those men and perhaps older adults who are unable to protect themselves. The fact of the matter is if you consider a marginal survival scenario, children are the most important people. Women of childbearing age are the second most important people. And healthy men are a distant third in terms of importance, but are also quite important. And then elders are very important as repositories of knowledge and holders of culture and, wisdom and being able to really help supercharge a village. But in terms of utility, if you had to make difficult cuts, they'd be one of the groups that wouldn't make the cut, right? Just like men, if given the choice between do the men survive or do the women and children survive, the correct answer is the women and children survive, because then there's a future, right? The women can go out and perform 70% at the level men can in terms of gathering resources and protecting, maybe lower, maybe higher, depending. But that's the first and foremost job of a man. Then I also believe that a man's job is to provision. And then I believe a man's job after that is to provide structure. And many of the structures of society that are quite wonderful and beautiful parts of our civilization, a lot of them men made. Yes, history has minimized the contributions of women. There's no doubt about it. But the fact of the matter is that it certainly looks like the vast majority of civilizational structures, both good and bad, were created primarily by men. However, women hold culture, which is much more powerful and much more important. Women hold culture and pass it on to children. And so, men and women carry structure in different ways. Women tend to carry it more internally in the subtle form, culture, wisdom, raising of the children, getting the next generation ready for the world, which somehow that's been denigrated by society. The single most important thing that humanity does, which is a mother taking care and raising a child, has been denigrated and defiled by our society. And we've convinced people that it's a hassle and it's not something good. It's not something laudable when it's the most important thing. The creating of future generations and encoding them with good culture. It's so incredibly important. And so I think that once you take care of those things as musts, as imperatives, then after that you can have additional code of honor that is things more like, chivalric codes minus the 70% of them that had to do with horses, right? But chivalrous behavior, codes of honor, I think it's important for all adults, men and women both, to honor their word and to stick with their principles, right? Otherwise, they're not principles, unless you discover somehow that your principle, through deep reflection, that a principle is not in line with the rest of your principles. It should be a very rare thing as a mature adult to change your principles. And so in that sense, having a code of honor and what's sacred to him and devotes himself into honoring is super awesome and laudable, but I see it as a higher octave or a higher level sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs compared to those other divine masculine imperatives, which first and foremost is protecting the innocent and protecting women and children. And look around us, guys, we've fucking failed. Like, the enemy's in the city and they're taking our women and they're taking our children, right? And they have ill intent for both. And that's a problem. And we as men need to step up and do something about that. And of course, women will help with that too. Again, when I'm talking about these archetypal things, I'm not denigrating those women who carry Amazonian, like, badass warrior woman energy, right? That is some women's dharma, just like there's some men that are more nurturing, peacemaking men, and that's okay. There's a way to be in your divine masculine and have your own specific personality quirks as a man, the same way there's a way to be in your divine feminine and maybe be a badass babe, you know, who kicks ass, right? You can still be feminine inside of that. So yeah, devotes himself in honoring. It's his personal moral philosophy. Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think it just really what has to underpin that is what I said, because anything beyond that becomes really like cultural or philosophical, whereas those other things are biological imperatives for our species. And unfortunately, we're at a point where we need to return to the basics and make sure that we're taking care of our biological imperatives for our species. And then we can kind of deal with the fancier, more rarefied air beyond that, right? At least that's my opinion. All right, so I'm going to go to the next question, and then I will eventually go back and comment on some of the commentary here if we run out of questions. So Vinay Lal asks, I'm interested to know about XRP in relation to the same aspects you mentioned about USD. For example, does XRP stack up in relation to creation of supply, centralization, etc.? It has issues with centralization. It's vastly lower supply. There's only 100 billion that will ever be created. It's capped. They were minted all at once. They were pre-mined. There'll never be more. It is pretty centralized in the Ripple escrow, but they have automated market maker stuff to where they periodically sell it and then they buy it back. And that's actually a positive from the point of view of deep-pocketed financial institutions. Is it concerning in terms of control? Well, sure, but the potential is there for that XRP could be a truly evil thing if it just acts as a go-between for walled garden CDBCs, the way they've sold it to the Malakians. Were it to go in that direction, it'd be totally evil. If it goes in a different direction of where it's elastic in terms of like price, probably the price has to be vastly higher. But if you're able to like split it out, elastic's not the word I wanted, fungible, right? You can split it into 1 million drops per XRP. It's just, it has a lot of tremendous utility that I see will be very beneficial to helping the economy. Are there concerns about the level of centralization? Yes, absolutely. People who think that Bitcoin is decentralized are fooling themselves. They only think that because the identities of wallets are not understood, but just the sheer concentration of Bitcoin in certain wallets, not least of which is the unknown, unaccounted for Satoshi wallet, right? Which would be a totally dominant share. Bitcoin is not decentralized either. It might have been at one point in time, but it certainly is not now. It's quite centralized. Ethereum's even worse. Ethereum is even worse, and it's non-transparent. Where XRP is better than Ethereum or Bitcoin, in my opinion, in that regard, right? Which all of these are elite economic systems. So they're not necessarily like, or certainly are not in the best interest of us in the sense of, there might be a fair method of exchange, but of course these elites are looking for an edge, right? And centralization control is a big part of that. They're at least transparent at Ripple about who owns what, right? About how much are owned by the founding members, which is a lot, and how much is in the escrow. However, I think quite a lot of the escrow is spoken for. It's not something that's proven right now. And when we do find out one way or the other, it'll be kind of too late. I suspect we're going to find out that almost all the escrow that Ripple has of XRP, which is like 45 billion, right? Like half the supply, something like that. Pretty high centralization for sure. Almost all of that, I think we're going to find has already been pre-sold to various financial institutions, and it will come out of the escrow and go to those financial institutions. It's just being held in there and then will be distributed all at once, which makes sense from certain financial things. But really, I have a fairly reasonable understanding of XRP, but I would recommend Black Swan Capitalist. Digital Asset Investor, his quality has kind of dipped recently, in my opinion, but still pretty good. And then the guy on 24 Hours Crypto, he's recently been dipping into meme coins, which is just shake my head. But his work on XRP is quite good. I would say look at those people, and they can take you to a much deeper place of understanding than I can. And you're a computer guy, so you can get way beyond where I'm at. Okay. You tried to warn me that you're a ketchup half joker face. I think it's hilarious. I think it's hilarious that I look like a dumbass for the vast majority of the stream. I find that funny. All right. And so let's see. I guess L has accumulated other ones. Oswald Spanger says, just don't move into a McMansion like Jimmy Dore did. No, I definitely will not. Instinctive Archer says, I like your explanation of the 17th letter thing. Been wondering about that off and on for years. Yeah, I just think it's a very sophisticated, multi-layered psyops. And I think that something akin to what they talk about is exactly what will end up happening. Something very similar to the outlines of what they said. But the specifics of it have to be kept secret, of course, right? If you're going to defeat your enemy, you have to confuse them. But one of the most devastating things the Luciferians can do is drop this real information. But they want to keep them in a state of panic. And every time that the Malachians kind of settle down again, there'll be a sudden onslaught of Luciferian propaganda, and they start getting paranoid again, and they start making mistakes again. The Luciferians are just puppet mastering the Malachians at this point in terms of the O.O.D.A loop, in my opinion. We'll know decisively one way or the other by this time next year. By this time next year, we'll be 6 days from the end of the Kali Yuga, praise be to the Most High, and the dust will have settled from the 2024 election, and I think things will be well and truly underway in terms of, the proverbial shit hitting the rotary cooling device. All right. ABAX Technology has set up a natural gas deliverable contracts out of Singapore using Ethereum. Chinese BTC miners control the price. A 51% attack is quite possible with BTC. Absolutely. Not to mention they have quantum computers now, and so they can run Shor's algorithm and just slice through any encryption. You're going to have quantum level encryption, right? So like weirdly, all the crypto is vulnerable to some degree. I think that there'll be additional layers of protection that'll be added to the new financial system. But I don't know. I think Ethereum's not going to be with us in 5-7 years. Bitcoin may very well. It's so difficult to discern with Bitcoin. Is it going to be digital gold, or will they back XRP? If they back XRP in gold, right, whether they're bringing in an asteroid of gold to be 1-to-1, or whether they're going to say 50 XRP is 1 gold ounce, and then they revalue the price of gold to $100,000 or whatever, right? I don't know. I do know that if like Bitcoin if XRP or some other coin gets backed in gold, then it's over for Bitcoin, right? It's over, because then if you can actually exchange tokens for gold, right? If you have tokenized gold, which the BRICS are doing exactly this, I think it's over for Bitcoin, but maybe not. I don't know. Bitcoin's been incredibly resilient thus far. That one rich old dude said, if you know who made Bitcoin, if you really know who made it, you would sell it so fast it would make your face scream, because if people really knew who made Bitcoin, who really made Bitcoin, it would drop to zero instantly. I don't know. I'm of the opinion that David Schwartz and 3 other people, Arthur Brito being one of them, made Bitcoin. I don't know who the other 2 are. Not many, and it was women who introduced the Declaration of Sentiments at Seneca Falls in 1848. I don't know what the Declaration of Sentiments is, Bankster Rap. So great comment, but I would need more information. That's new information to me. I have no idea what that is. So I would love to see a follow-up if you want to mention it, if you're still here. Thank you, Zachary. I appreciate it. Oswald said, there's a lot of bovine feminine and confused masculine energy floating around at the moment. I think you meant, did you mean divine feminine? Or were you talking about some of the women on the left needing some diet tips? So much insight here, Ian. Well done. Very interesting. Oh, thank you, Vinny. That's really kind of you to say. Elle, you deserve half of the super chat money for work tonight. Yeah, Elle, I'm going to eventually be able to pay Elle. She's helping with all kinds of executive assistant stuff. So she will definitely, the minute I can afford to have someone paid, and in the meantime, I'll be giving her exchanges of some of my services in exchange for her work. So she definitely will get paid in one way or another. More than anything, we need a loving and harmonious coexistence between men and women. We need to rebuild trust in each other. 100%. Could not agree more. And, you know, I always get nervous when I talk about that subject, because so often women especially feel really hurt because women have really taken the brunt of the dark masculine patriarchy of the past 6,000 years. And they've also been targeted in this modern fifth generational warfare with propaganda and the weaponized empathy, much more so than men. They realized if they got control of women, women are the bottleneck for population. So for depopulation reasons, target them. And then also women control culture with children. Look at all these moms who have Munchausen's by proxy, who are, you know, having their kid change gender so mom can get more attention. That's pure social engineering at its evilest, you know, / finest in terms of the amount of mind fuckery. So many of the gender roles and patterns observed cross-culturally would seem to imply that traditional roles are natural forms of self-organization, but ultimately men and women should be free to choose their own path. The freedom, energy, and joy derived from their core, what they need to express in the world. Yeah, I think that that's true, that during the Kali Yuga, those were sort of the traditional, that's like the natural form of self-organization. Would that be true outside of this Yuga? I'm not sure. I'm just telling you like what the angel said, as far as that things are going to change in very significant ways in terms of relating in the mainstream culture. And it kind of makes sense that, you know, thruples, right, over three-person couples, thruples, and, you know, a woman like that woman who had the two partners I mentioned earlier, or a man who has two partners, right, and everyone's on board and consent and all that stuff. It only makes sense that they should be able to get married too. Like, why not? Why shouldn't they? It's just, you know, religious stuff, really, to say they shouldn't. It's nonsense, in my opinion, that you say gay marriage is fine and all this other stuff. But, you know, two men and a woman, like my friend's mom, that they couldn't all be married and enjoy the privileges of that. Or we could just take away marriage from the state altogether and let people self-organize, which that would be even better. I do tend to agree with you. I mean, there's definitely something about, like, you need those two energies to come together, right, in order to conceive a child. And only one father can be, no matter how many men are with that one woman, only one of those men will be the father. So clearly on that level, there is sort of a basic unit of positive and negative. But I do also think that we would do better to have people be honest about what their needs are and have healthy ways of relating to one another to make sure everyone's needs are being met, and let everyone self-select for that and have everyone be honest. You know, pounding the table for monogamy and having 70% of monogamous relationships, or whatever insane number it is nowadays, involve cheating. How does that work? How does that make any sense, right? Like, that would seem to be quite a, sure, yeah, that's culturally engineered, but we know now from 23andMe that women cheat way more than we thought. Way more. And so there's been a lot more cheating going on for a lot longer than we've come to accept until very recently. I've been almost exclusively in monogamous relationships most of my life. I did, when I was younger, try a couple times poly, and I was able to do it. And I was very ethical and everyone was informed. But every time I tried it, my partner was not ethical and did not have consent all the way around. And in one case, gave me an easily curable disease in chlamydia. It's 20 years ago now. Super embarrassing and horrifying. But that's not an example of having an open relationship that's healthy now, is it? Whereas I was like very careful. I was very like, I talked with all my partners, beforehand, said, oh, I have this girlfriend in England and we're like have an open relationship, especially while we're separate, right? Whatever. And like, I was totally on the level and good and honest with everyone involved. And a shocking amount of women in college were like, hey, that sounds great. That sounds fine. Right? Like they didn't care. Once I told them what was up, they didn't care. And they actually, some of them outright liked it because then they could get a certain amount of affection and so forth from me and open up in a way that they wouldn't have been able to do if it was one-on-one in a weird kind of way. But then it fell apart for me because my partner was unethical. So I've primarily been monogamous the vast, vast majority of my life. And I do see what you're saying. But I don't think that we should just say that definitively, like it's not an okay thing when so many people are failing at monogamy. That's all I'm saying. So let's see here. Haha, thanks. I'm just happy to help. The Holy Grail supposedly made from the emerald gem that fell from Satan or Lucifer's crown. Yeah, I've heard this before. It's very interesting. I may be able to ask someone who might actually know about that exact thing. I've been wondering about this for a long time. Joseph Farrell talks about this. Huh. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize that ISO 222 went into effect in Europe. I'm really hoping for a massive pullback of 30 to 40%. Bitcoin almost always has a 30 to 40% retracement in the month prior to the halving, which we're now officially in that zone. So I'm really hoping for the 30 to 40% pullback so I can get in on yet more XRP and then some other, I want to kind of beef up some of my other holdings, XDC, XLM, HBAR, some of these other coins that are ISO 222 compliant or connected to those ISO 222 coins in a significant way. I'm certain there's going to be stuff that'll probably blow away XRP, XOM, all this stuff. But I don't know what they are. The only utility tokens, right, meaning blockchain technology that has real world use case and utility, the only ones I'm super familiar with are the financial parts. There's other stuff for Web 3.0 and like blockchain based calls, which I don't even understand why you need to make a call on the blockchain, but okay, right? Like there's going to be other utility coins that are going to just go absolutely berserk. I just don't know what they are. I haven't bothered to do it. I spent a lot of time and effort figuring out the financial coins. And like, frankly, like that's enough for me. I don't need to know anymore. And then maybe in the future, I will figure out Web 3.0 coins, what NFT minters are good investments, stuff like that. But I'm just going to stick with what I know right now because I feel like it could pop off at any time. Okay, so feminism is a powerful hate movement dressed up as a movement for equality. It is engineered a hatred of men as dominators and oppressors whose single aim is to control women. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's definitely the critical lens view of the feminist movement. I don't agree that it's 100% hateful and 100% bad. I think that there's been important things have been brought into elements. There's been important elements brought into society by the feminist movement that I think we shouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. There were elements of patriarchy that were very dark. I'm old enough to remember when it was not uncommon for husbands to beat their wives or their children, right? And feminism did help to bring attention to exactly that and some of the really negative dynamics between men and women that were hidden under patriarchy and old school traditionalism. But that doesn't mean that we should throw the baby out with the bathwater and say all men are bad and all men are evil and dominators and oppressors, because that is also obviously false. So whenever the pendulum swings too far in either direction, as a general rule, I disagree with that. So I certainly see what you're saying, and I do think that's where it got its funding from. I think it got its funding from Rockefellers and others who were trying to do exactly what you describe here. But I don't think that nothing of merit has come out of the feminist movement. I just think that there's been some very awful things that have come out of it. So, all right. Look Within said, good to catch you live. Hey, how's it going? Whole lot of synchronicities, lady. Almost the exact same messages coming from different places. Yeah, I know. The synchronicities are off the chain right now. All right. Oh, I like what Elle said here. Don't forget to give that like button a little love. Yeah, no kidding. Or even a lot of love. Have your way with that like button. Consenting adults, unless it's a like button, then just have your way with that like button. No, too far, too soon after the conversation tonight. Let's see here. That like button is asking for like. You saw the way it's giving you the thumbs up. Expendability and disposability in service of women and children has long been a given. Both traditional and modern men are now actually despised by society. They are sent the message that even their sacrifices carry no weight and men can never purge their toxic masculinity. This is after decades of anti-male propaganda. Hey, man, you don't have to sell me on that. I agree with you. I'm just saying, like, again, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Some value came out of some of the feminist critiques. Some value even came out of some of the Marxist critiques of capitalism, and I fucking hate Marxism. But that doesn't mean that, like, even a lot of capitalists took Das Kapital and look at some of the critiques Marx gave of capitalism in order to increase the efficiency of their capitalist efforts, which I love the irony of that and find that extra amusing nowadays. But yeah, likewise, like even if the general thrust of feminism has been kind of toxic for society in general, I don't think it's without merit. But for sure, men have been shit on massively by propaganda and manipulation. What's the worst that would happen if they collectively decided that men were no more disposable than women and women no more valuable than men? If we all collectively said men were no more disposable and women were no more valuable than men. I just think it's objectively false. And here's why. If every man on earth died except for me, I would be very happy, sad for all my homies, but I would be happy to volunteer myself for sacrifice in order to impregnate those remaining 2 billion women who were of childbearing age in order to ensure humanity continues. But if all men on earth died, they say that here's the thing they say. They say if you have an island and you drop 100 women and 1 man on it, and you have another island, you drop 100 men and 1 woman on it, you go to the first island, you'll come back in 100 years, and there might very well be a thriving society of several hundred people with a lot of genetic diversity. But you go to the second island, you're going to find 100 sets of bones. Yeah. So it would be a lie because it's not true. Women are more valuable from a species level. But the problem is that men have been horribly devalued by society. And this is what I mean. And I say this with love, but just the energy of some of these comments that I've been reading shows a lot of, to me, that there's some pain there to where women have probably mistreated you terribly, and that society has perhaps tilted things to where it's been painful for you. And believe me, I understand. I've had a lot of women really mistreat me, but I've had to do a lot of work to kind of work through that. And just when I read some of these messages, I just feel a lot of charge. And I see that a lot when I talk about the subject, men and women both. There's a real charge to it because we've been hurt. We've been hurt. And what we really need to do is just see what we can do to heal. And I think that demonizing feminism or patriarchy, men going their own way, right, and not trying to understand what underlies it and how we can heal is a missed opportunity for our species, and is something that we kind of, frankly, there's an imperative that we must do. By the way, check out Love Evolved in Subtext for Divine Feminine Perspective, Leon Lapinto. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I see RFK Jr. as Luciferian as well. Absolutely. No one is quite sure who he will be stealing voters from. It's trying to seem like a Lucy Pincer attack on Biden. That's what I think it is. I think what will happen at the end is that RFK will fold out of the race and endorse Trump, is what I think will actually happen. After siphoning off as many of the Democrats. I also just don't think it matters. I think in a legal election of U.S. citizens, it'll be a giga landslide for Trump. Giga landslide. So it'll be like Reagan versus Mondale, and maybe even going back to Eisenhower levels of utter cremation of the opponent. And Michael Runswick, Modern Masculinity for the Conscious Man. Yeah, I like that. By the way, if you're enjoying, give it a like. Yeah, I made the horrible joke. Does all significant spiritual advancement require interaction with other beings? Oh, absolutely. You could achieve it totally within yourself. I mean, the highest level of attainment will only happen from within, right? Like the highest level of attainment being, in my estimation, like enlightenment and stages of evolution beyond that. But enlightenment is to me the egoic equivalent of reaching escape velocity off of a planet. Once you do that, there's still infinite space to explore, but the big trick was getting out of that planet's gravity well in the first place. And so the moment of enlightenment is where you've actually left the gravity well of the ego or the delusion, right? The delusion. But there's still a whole universe to explore once you get off the planet. So it marks a significant achievement, and I think it's the ultimate one, and that one definitely does not require it. For me, I was very much moving in that direction, but then I hit a wall and I couldn't go any further because I felt like, I didn't know why. I just didn't know why. And I know now it was that I had unresolved trauma that was preventing me from releasing in the gut. And so you don't have to interact with other beings. And in fact, I, as a general rule, recommend, funny perhaps to hear me say this, but as a general rule, I recommend against interacting with other beings unless you're very careful in how you do it, because the odds of getting angels is fairly low, right? Unless you're a very healthy, integrated person, you're probably vibrating at a frequency. And I'm not picking on you, Stormcrawl. I'm talking about I was vibrating at a frequency. It's the best way to put it. I was vibrating a frequency a few years ago, and I think this is not uncommon, to where I was more likely to interact with lower astral spirits because of all the trauma and other negative experiences that I had. And I had to do a great deal of healing and integration, which the angels also accelerated. And they kind of went hand in hand with each other. Like as I became more integrated, I could work better with the angels, and then I could become more integrated. And I still have plenty of integration to do. I'm not trying to say that, but I am a lot further than I was a few years ago. I mean, you can even watch earlier videos from this channel, and you can see it in my eyes. I guarantee it. I can see it in my eyes. So yeah, you can begin with that traditional initiation. Just learn meditation. That's the first thing. Read Adyashanti. Read Eckhart Tolle, because of being friends with Oprah, right? Might be tainted, but like I found The Power of Now and The New Earth to be really helpful for me in my awakening process, and it's much more accessible than a lot of the text. Probably for a Westerner, one of the best people you could look at is Adyashanti, or you can look at David Waldman. He has a YouTube presence. I've talked about him in previous things. Heart of Silence, I think, is this thing. David Waldman, Devaji, David, and then Waldman is WALDMAN. I believe it's In the Heart of Silence is what his channel is called. I have somehow 5 times as many subscribers. It's just ludicrous. This man should have 500,000 subscribers, or 5 million, or 5 billion would be beautiful if he did. That's someone that I think is accessible, although he's a little bit out there. Probably Adyashanti is the most accessible Western teacher that isn't perhaps tainted the way that Tolle might be perceived as being tainted, because he's friends with Oprah and went on Oprah and stuff. And Oprah, of course, is bad news. Don't worry, that like button will be sort of when you stop feeling pain, be worried. It's true. Yeah. When you're really sick, then you don't feel the pain anymore. All right. So if there's not any other questions, it's been 2 hours. I think that's pretty good. I think it's enough to be part of the 2-time back-to-back live stream champion. I wish I had some Dr. Disrespect glasses that I could wear. That guy really cracks me up. Y'all continue to tell y'all letting Ian continue as he has tomato sauce in his beer. Oh, I love that I did almost an entire love stream with a freaking live stream with freaking ketchup on my beard. That is some next level awesomeness. So yeah, I'm embarrassed enough to where the ketchup would just blend in now and you wouldn't even be able to see it. So I'm just kind of going back and seeing if there's anything there. I'm just looking to see. Yeah, insects already getting put in. Oh yeah, absolutely. I forget what it's called, but there's a ton of different things. Hey, what's up, Jose? How's it going? I gave you a shout out earlier, brother. I'm just kind of briefly scanning through here. I think we have most everything has been covered thanks to the handy dandy L. Lucifer Prizes. This is so much funnier to read this way after the fact and just knowing that I'm immortalized for having like ketchup in my beard for like it's now part of the permanent human record. That's just amazing. Makes me so happy. I can't even tell you. It's a better world if everyone talking about Elon Musk on YouTube French residue on their cheek. Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. 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 It's part of the reason they weaponized against women, weaponized propaganda against women. And then you can turn all those tools that you mentioned there to against men and to use it as part of the way of attacking both men and women. So I never did hear a follow-up on that Bankster rap. I would have loved to hear that. Yeah. All right. Well, I think unless there's new stuff, it looks like just look within pain. Here's good. Yeah, no, I think I already read that. Oh, wait, there's a couple more. Here we go. You are up to date in all comments and questions, Ian. Why, thank you. With the wrench in hand. Is there a spiritual difference between Eastern and Western bodies? Do some methods only work with either? Do you mean like physically being born Asian versus Caucasian? Or what do you mean Eastern and Western bodies? Do you mean Eastern bodies of work? I find that Eastern teachers are not super accessible to the average Westerner. It took me a while to begin to learn how to read Eastern spiritual teachings and actually understand it, because there's certain cultural underpinnings to like Taoism and so forth that are commonly understood things in the Asian sphere that are not commonly understood in the West. And so there's a lot of stuff where they expect you to know it implicitly and you don't. And so I find that generally speaking, for Western people, certain Western teachers are better who have already figured out these Eastern concepts and then have figured out how to communicate them in a Western style. That's just my personal opinion. Dr. Disrespect is the GOAT. Yeah, no kidding. He's fucking hilarious. I hear he threw 70 yards football. That's hilarious. He claims to have thrown football 70 yards. He threw it 60 something. It's pretty impressive. We tried to warn you, I swear. Haha. Yep. Eastern versus Western seems so different that I was wondering if there was a physical reason. Yeah, I mean, it's the Himalayas. That's the physical reason right there. The reason that the Eastern mind is different from the Western mind is there's this gigantic ass fucking mountain range called the Himalayas. And you'll notice all the Eastern thinking is south and east of the Himalayas. And all the Western thinking is usually very far west of the Himalayas. So it's a geophysics reason, I would argue, or a geopolitical type thing. And that's why China has been Chinese in some way for 5,000 years, because they're surrounded on three sides by the Himalayas. So they can only really be attacked from the south or through narrow passes in the Himalayas, and hence the Great Wall of China. They tried to wall off all those passes. Didn't work. The Mongols overcame it, but it did work for a long time and kept the barbarians of the steppes out of China. Will we know the transition to Lucy is complete by the end of sacrifices during March 21st to May 1st period? You mean this year, Alex, or are you talking about March 21st of 2025? I don't know whether sacrifices per se will instantaneously go away. My understanding is that pedophilia will be largely gone from the planet by 2028, almost erased. I imagine human sacrifices would be high on the list of things that the Lucys want to get under control, because the Molochans do use human sacrifice as a very powerful spiritual weapon as well. So I don't know. Every year to date, I do not understand what you mean, brother. Let me read this again. When we know the transition is complete by the end of sacrifices during March 21st to May 1st period, and then you say every year to date. I do not get it, Alex. So you have to clarify that question, and then I'll be able to answer it for it. I'll give you a second here. Thank you, Elle. And also shout out, I don't know if she's watching, but shout out to Heather. Heather is also going to be helping me with setting up. I'll just go ahead and announce this because I want to give her a shout out. We're working on a potential for there being like some kind of in-person event. It'll be primarily people who've done the angelic magic classes, but there might be some other people on this channel who would like to meet some of the people who share the beliefs that are often on this channel in person, and that would be sometime probably in September. It's still in a very early stage of planning, and more than likely, I imagine that mostly just angelic magic students who know each other, and maybe others who get attracted to the community as the online community comes together would be interested in coming. And so shout out to Heather for helping me on that. You asked when the season of sacrifice has been going on for ages. Would be nice to see that end. Okay, let's see. You asked when. The season of sacrifice has been going on for ages. Every year to date. Oh, you're responding to something I said. Yeah. So I'm really just trying to parse this out, brother. Like, when will they stop doing their sacrifice thing? Quite possibly as soon as next year. It could be that the Lucys put the clamp on that next year, just because the sooner they put the clamps on the pedos, the better from a power transition point of view. That's why I strongly suspect that's going to kick off later this year. That'll be some of the first people that get gobbled up by the Lucys, frontier justice / rig justice, kangaroo court justice. And these people don't really deserve any mercy anyway, so I'm not going to be shedding a lot of tear for judicial process on this. But I guarantee there'll be people who will be like, I really support what the Luciferians are doing because they're clearly the party of justice and righteousness. And I'm just going to be like, Jesus Christ, you're not paying attention at all. You don't understand. There's going to be people, right-wingers, who are going to be like, this is all like justice in America, and like everything's on the up and up and things are exactly as they appear. I guarantee there'll be people who think that when they do the Nuremberg trials, and that'll be the dominant thing that'll be pounded day in and day out, is these people we got rid of are so evil. Check, true, fact check, 100% true. And we, the good guys, have come in to rescue. And bullshit, total bullshit. Like, these are not going to be good people. A step in the right direction for humanity, absolutely. But we must not forget that these Luciferians are incredibly dangerous, and they're going to be the dominant power. And so they're going to be they really will be the new bad guys. It'll be replacing a bunch of self-hating monsters and psychopaths with a bunch of like super slick snake oil salesman narcissists, right? Better to deal with, but still very slippery. And in some ways, they're going to have such an insanely powerful narrative behind them about how they're the good guys who rode off from off stage to save the planet, that most people are going to buy it hook, line, and sinker. They're going to be so shocked when it's all revealed, and then they're going to immediately look upon the people who are stepping in to take control as white knights and heroes. And that's why they've been so assiduously creating that narrative on the fringes. in order to have it, much like, sorry to use a horrifying analogy, but much like the firebombing of Dresden, where you did fire all around the outside and then a bit of fire in the middle, and then the fire goes, like they're starting brush fires on the outside of society by dropping all these truth bombs, and also this narrative, their core narrative, that the white hats are coming to save you. The white hats are coming to save you. And that's going to eventually go from the fringes to the center. And we're on the cusp of that happening. I bet you in the next 5-6 months, you'll see people like Jimmy Dore, former sincere lefties, maybe Russell Brand, right? Former lefties who will say, wow, I can't wait until these good guys save us from the pedophiles. You're going to see sometime, maybe 6 months is a little early, but sometime in the next 6 to 9 months, you're going to start seeing people that are much more in the center start picking up these fringe 17th letter of the alphabet type conspiracies and carrying that banner. I bet you. If I'm right about what I'm seeing, then that's what's going to happen. I mean, I guess obviously, but yeah. So anyways, yeah, I think there's a decent chance that they'll put the clamps on that. I know their priority is to end the pedo thing, which is the more important of the two to end anyway, actually. But I think there's a good chance that they'll put the clamps on that too. They don't mind sacrifices in a certain sense, like they're willing to break a few eggs to make an omelet kind of mentality, but they definitely, the whole hardcore human sacrifice thing, like en masse, that's very much a Malachian thing. So there is a good chance that it will end. Yeah, well, Ryan, I am actually just winding up right now unless I get more questions. Oh, there's one more question. I do actually want to get off soon. I'm starting to get pretty tired. Let's see here. Thoughts around fourth dimension, squaring the circle, doubling of the cube. Wow, this is like, I'm exhausted. And then someone's like, how about the most insanely deep, multi-layered, over the top, genius tier question just to cap the night off to make sure Ian's brain explodes. All right, let me try reading this again. Thoughts about, I'm just going to read it. I'm going to try to parse it out. Thoughts about fourth dimension, squaring the circle. Interesting. I would not have necessarily associated those two, but I'm curious to see why you do. Perhaps you're three-dimensionalizing those figures. Doubling of the cube. Not sure what you mean by that. Tetractus. Do you mean like a tesseract? Or is this something else? I don't know what a tetractus is. A torus, I know what that is. I think that vortexes are key to movement between dimensions, and that spin is key to dimensions. So torus is a vortex spin-based function. And so I think there's a relationship to higher dimensions because of that. I'm not sure where you're going with squaring the circle. And then doubling of the cube. Again, I'm not certain what... I know what you're talking about, squaring in the circle, right? The Masonic concept, but I'm not sure what you're talking about here with doubling of the cube and tetractus. Perhaps I've heard of it in a different form. Doubling the cube looks slightly familiar, but that other word I'm not familiar with. I've seen it maybe once before, but I don't know what it means. So I'm just being honest. Is magic just manifestation of threefold thought? I don't understand the concept of threefold thought well enough to answer that question. I'm trying to think instead of how to offer my thoughts on magic in a succinct way. I think magic is the best way of looking at it is you look at the Hermetic principles. I think that the core principle that makes magic work, the core engine, there's other things like sympathy and rhythm, and like all the Hermetic principles really have an important part to play in how magic works. But the principle of mentalism, that the universe is mental in nature and that we live in a dream world, essentially. The modern dead materialist types love to say that it's a simulation. It's on some alien Atari 2600 system in Alpha Centauri. Some little alien kid is playing the game of Earth, and we're just stuck in this civilization or whatever trash remakes of the Gnostic concept of the demiurge and the Mara or Maya in the East. That understanding that the universe is mental in nature is basically, when you understand that, then the rest of magic sort of unfolds from that. But that's the core principle, that the world is Brahman, Brahman alone is world, the world is Brahman. That whole, the world is illusion, Brahman alone is real, right? The world is illusionary, it's a dream, like Lao Tzu said, right? Or Shuangzi, rather, said that. The world is a dream, and then the only thing that exists is the mind of God. So if you can learn how to interface between your conscious mind and then the common surface layer between your conscious mind and the God mind, the cloud system, if you will, to use an analogy, that runs this simulation, to use the modern analogy, right? The common surface area is the subconscious mind. So you take an active thought and desire, and then you, through ritual, you get into a liminal state, and you push that conscious desire down into the unconscious, and then you can upload it to the cloud of Brahman, or hack the operating system of the universe, because you are correctly using the principle of mentalism. So I would say the principle of mentalism, if you really deeply understand that, you'll have 80% of what you need to do effective magic. I do urge extreme caution. Based on your question, you're not someone who's a novice, and so I don't need to, I'm not saying this in a paternalistic way towards you. You stumped me here in a bunch of things. You may very well have a deeper knowledge than I have. I don't know. You'll message me to describe more. Yeah, that sounds good. Let me finish my thought here. So I would just urge caution to any of my viewers who are considering or intrigued by the use of magic because of talking about it on this channel. You need to be really careful, because there's a huge karmic component. And when you take on the role of co-creator of the world at that level, not just at the level of participation physically, but at the level of where you're changing the fabric of reality to some degree, you are taking on a tremendous amount of karmic responsibility for the results of your actions. And I just urge the highest degree of caution when you use magic. Just be careful if you're going to do it. And you're all adults. I talk about it a lot on this channel, and I explain reasons for that. I'm not going to sort of belabor that point again. I might do more videos on magic. I'm certainly going to do more on angelic magic, but I might do more on magic generally on this channel if there's interest, which I think there is. I'll message you to describe more. Thank you so much for opening up like you do and sharing yourself in a genuine way. Thank you for the food of thought. I appreciate that. Yeah, I try to. You know, I make mistakes, and I was perhaps a little bit harsh about a commenter yesterday, but then the commenter kind of prove their character through some other means. But regardless, you know, I'm not perfect, but I do try and share genuinely my honest experience and my take on things as best I can, and understanding, trying to have that sacred humility while also having divine masculine confidence, and try and bring those things together. So I speak in a confident way about things I'm confident about. For example, you asked this whole series of questions where I didn't even understand some of the aspects of it because of the depth of your question. And so when I don't have a large body of understanding of something, if I have enough to have formed an opinion, I'll share that opinion, usually with the caveat that it's just an opinion. It's not strongly formed. If it's something I feel really strong and really like I have the foundation of a deep amount of understanding, then I say it with a lot more confidence, with a lot more caveats. But I do try and share things to the best of my understanding without trying to pretend like I know everything. And also I try and be open and transparent in the hope that other people can open up. I also think it's a way of protecting yourself. If you're open about all your flaws and all the things where you've fallen short in your life, makes it a lot harder to blackmail you or control or manipulate you, because some of the best tools for that is things you're ashamed of, which is another reason to do shadow work and that kind of stuff. And so when I share things, I don't have to worry about someone from my past coming out and going, oh my God, like he is was addicted to hardcore pornography. I walked in on him a couple times as a roommate. Like people would be like, so Ian talks about that all the time and his struggles with hardcore porn addiction, right? Like they couldn't use it against me. So I also think that talking about like the assaults I suffered and stuff, I think is helpful to men who feel a lot of shame generally about when they've experienced sexual assault. And there's not as robust of support systems for men, to put it very mildly, as there are for women. And I didn't have the strength during Me Too when some men came out and talked about it. I didn't have the strength at that time to talk about it, and I do now. And so I try and do that so that way other men can maybe feel like they can seek out the help they need to work through that experience, and same thing with the porn addiction or other ways that I failed. And I also hope that it displays that you can have these kind of flaws and work through them. So that's why I try and share that stuff in the hopes of inspiring others. It's why I do it. And also, it does protect me in a funny kind of roundabout way. Wise, much respect. Thank you, Hirschman. I think I'm going to call it there, folks. I just saw a double 26, 2 hours, 26 minutes, and 26 viewers. So seems like a good place to stop it. Much love, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all the people who joined in the chat. And there will be a forum opening up in the future that will have a public side, and then it will probably have a very minor $1 a month or something like that paywall, just to keep out the riffraff. No, to keep out. I just find that if people have even a tiny amount of skin in the game, their behavior is completely different than someone who's just walking in off the street, especially with all the toxicity and social media. Because I would like to have people be able to come together and share ideas and share thoughts and build community. What I hope is to help people to form bonds of community in different localities, wherever they are, that they happen to watch this channel and resonate with the ideas on it that come from the angels and through me. So thank you so much, everyone. Much love, and have a great evening. All right. Bye-bye.